For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to Strat News Global. I'm Nitin Gokhale. And as usual, every week we have a books discussion on a recent book about strategy, about foreign policy, about regional dynamics. And this time we are pleased to have a book on Sri Lanka, India's nearest southern neighbor, and the conundrum it faces. But before I introduce the book and the author, let me say this, that we do have our social media handles, our YouTube channel. Do subscribe to all of them and do follow us and send your feedback so that we know whether we are doing the right thing or we need to do something different. As I said, we are on Books Corner. So my guest today on Books Corner is a Sri Lankan analyst and author and an old friend, Asanga Abeyagoonasekera, who has written a recent book called Sri Lanka, The Conundrum of an Island, Sri Lanka's Geopolitical Challenges. Welcome to this program, Asanga, and we are doing this remotely. I wish we could have done it face-to-face, but I'm sure the corona situation will improve and then we'll have some occasion to meet face-to-face sometime. But welcome to this program.
Thank you, Nitin. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate your invitation.
Well, this program is about books, and I thought your latest book, if I'm not mistaken, this is your, second successive book in the last few years. And this is a very interesting title, Conundrum of an Island. And we are actually speaking about a week later, after the Sri Lankan Parliament passed the bill on the Colombo port city, which has created quite a buzz, I would say, quite a flutter, and maybe some confusion in the minds of the people. Does that conundrum in the Sri Lankan minds and strategic analyst minds come from the fact that Sri Lanka has become willy-nilly a playground for big power rivalries, or I would say competition? Is that something that you're hinting at in this book? Because I have read the book. I don't want to give it away to the readers who should buy this book and then read. But please let us know what you have actually said this in the book.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, you compared with what happened last week in the Parliament. The two-thirds majority was used to pass a bill, which is the port city of Colombo, and an extra jurisdictional right to the Chinese port city, and which was, they didn't have much time to be discussed in the Parliament, but it was passed, and the Speaker have signed it now, and so they are taking it forward. The conundrum is this exactly. I mean, you pointed out what I saw. I mean, when I finished this book back in January, and how the foreign policy is tilting towards China. I see a significant tilt because of few areas. Political decisions, policy decisions taken by the administration, such as the MCC, the US grant, which has been rejected by the government. Then again, the Japanese, the LRT project, the light railway project, which was again rejected by the government. The Indian port, which was a terminal, which was moved from East Container Terminal to West Container Terminal. That is still, and they are still pending what the clear decision is. So these are some of the policy decisions taken domestically to these projects. As you know, Sri Lanka has a significant Chinese infrastructure footprint. The significant growth of the Chinese infrastructure diplomacy in Sri Lanka. Book gives a clear analysis on what are the areas that Chinese have invested, ports, airports, water projects, electricity, when it comes to telecommunications, Huawei. So all that infrastructure, diplomacy, and how much of it is been sort of pressurized towards the country's domestic politics. And so the externalities or the great power rivalries out there, I sort of look into three spheres of influence coming into the island: the U.S., the Chinese, as well as the Indian sphere of influence, because India is the closest neighbor we have. But the Chinese significant sphere of influence is growing, and under Rajapaksa regime right now, things are sort of moving towards China tilt. So I call this a bandwagoning. I mean, the book I used, but I was, this. So again, so the writing is before the port city. So I think I'm on the absolute right track to use that term bandwagoning with China. So I don't see a balance, although it is rhetorically mentioned. Sri Lankan policy is non-aligned balance. We use that, but the conundrum is that we don't balance it, our foreign policy, but then we get into internal instability, political instability.
That's right. In fact, if you also use the term, but of course, in one of the chapters, you also countered the notion the world over, especially amongst think tanks and analysts, that Sri Lanka is getting into a debt trap. I was just looking at China's predatory loans, that section, where you've spoken about Mike Pence's speech at Hudson Institute and Dr. Harsh Pant's article titled India, BRI, and Delhi's Indo-Pacific Strategy. If the port city and earlier in 2016-17, the leasing of the Hambantota port is not getting into a debt trap, then how would you describe these two projects, or this tilt, very pronounced tilt that has happened in Sri Lanka of late in the past 3 or 4 years?
These projects and the Chinese loans have been projected within these the circles in I would say the academic circles, or the ones who are the policy narrative that's coming out, is that, look, the Chinese volume of debt is not so much, and the sovereign bonds as well as the private loans are much more. But that's not the case. My analysis is that Chinese loans have great opaqueness. There is no transparency. And so we actually don't know what the loans are used for, number one. And then when they're used for certain projects, there's not much of benefit coming out of these projects, such as the airport project in Makala, where there's no flights coming in. So certain business models are right now, it's up to now, it's not functioning really well. And the returns are less. So there is, what I'm trying to question is that there is a strategic outlook to these projects. There is a long-term strategic outlook. The port city, if you look at it, is for like more than 33 years. This regime is only, it's been a regime for 5 years to 6 years. But then they're looking at a longer-term horizon. So I kind of bring in regional comparison, looking at the Belt and Road Initiative, what China has, strategic depth of their projects, either be it in Laos, the high-speed rail track, or be it looking at the Djibouti or in Africa. So Sri Lanka is geostrategically well positioned. I call it that we are in the outer crescent of the rimland, an island that is so important geographically. But then again, Chinese, seeing the importance of the geographical position, taking advantage, taking over the 99-year Hambantota port, as well as the port city. So all these projects, if you look at the recent statement by the Secretary to the President, P.B. Jasundara, he says that the current debt is about more than around $55 billion US. So managing these debts and having a sustaining these repayments for what we have borrowed it's quite a challenge. And he has said no more loans, but then again we keep borrowing. Recently we did a currency swap with China for 1.5 billion, and again another billion. So we keep borrowing, but then again like why I quote Mike Pence is that absolutely he's correct on observing that there is a strategic side to it, these projects, because why would you sort of invest so much and then why doesn't the business model work? So there is Sri Lanka is kind of in a trap. But then again, the government doesn't assess these projects. That's
that's your contention in this book.
The subsequent government.
That's right. No, in fact, the other interesting thing I found, which I'll come to it subsequently, but do you think there is a danger of these ports like Hambantota and Colombo Port turning into military facilities for China? Because that's the biggest apprehension. And I then bring you to one of the assertions you make in this book, that in 2014, the Chinese submarines which came were not nuclear submarines, but they were conventional submarines. Now, this is a revelation in a way, because so far there has been the feeling, or there has been the thought in everybody's mind that the nuclear submarine coming from China actually created a misunderstanding between India and Sri Lanka that time. But you say very strongly that it's not so. Please explain to us that, and also the military angle, where China will try and make it a military facility.
Well, the hybrid model with China has exercised in different places around the world. Whether it will be, military, civilian use, it will be used like Hambantota Port. When there is a strategic dimension to these projects, so I don't see why China would not ask, from Sri Lankan government at one particular point of time that they would like to sustain security in the Indian Ocean and they would like to have outposts. So I don't take that, off my, analysis. So I think that definitely China would have that capacity because it has the economic, already the footprint in the island, and it's got the. If you look at the trends that's been happening for the last 2 years in the particular this government, so you see a trend that. China is slowly sort of building in the inroads to the, and it's very clear. The East Container Terminal was the best example, and where actually the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jaishankar, he was absolutely correct when he was in Colombo. He observed it very well. He saw it correctly, and he pointed it out, and saying that there is China behind this. So I bring in, all these narratives, looking at it from a Sri Lankan perspective, and then try to sort of compare how we look at these larger, strategic mental maps like BRI or Indo-Pacific, and how do Sri Lankans look at it? So there I bring in sort of, let's move away from the big power rivalry and sort of look at the middle powers. Let Sri Lanka work on middle powers rather than getting into binaries. Because when Yen Jiski was here, the senior ambassador was saying, look, be with us, be with the BRI. When the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, was here, he said, be with Indo-Pacific. So rather than being in the binaries, so let's work with the middle powers is one of the sort of recommendations I bring in, but being with both. Nuclear submarine, so I checked this because I was at the think tank at that time, foreign policy think tank, working there. So one of the areas that I wanted to check was how much how the New Delhi, the tension that was sort of created from this the submarine visit. And my analysis was that what if this repeats? What if it repeats again? Will we become like this? And what are the things that we should do to minimize that tension between Colombo and Delhi? So that's what I was looking at that time. So when I asked from a senior Chinese person that it was this nuclear organization, so he revealed that it was conventional.
I see. So that's an interesting revelation, I would say, in the book. But a very small part of the book. The larger part of this book, I must commend you for writing it, is the overall perspective you give and the framework in which you bring in politics, terrorism, regional rivalries, and the big power rivalries. And in a way, I think it's like Walter Russell Mead has said right on the front cover of the book. important example of Sri Lankan strategic thinking, useful text to understand emerging dynamics of the Indo-Pacific. Last question on this, Asanga. The Quad seems to be now gathering pace, gathering momentum. Where would Sri Lanka stand in your view? I know you've mentioned this a bit in your book about Sri Lanka's approach towards Quad, but let's hear it from you.
Definitely. So I've captured that in my book on the importance of Quad and EU presence. I wrote this sometime back about, one of my initials, so why European Union needs to be in the Indian Ocean. So I'm very happy that they released the Indo-Pacific strategy last month. And when I read it, it was fantastically written, not even mention China in their policy, not once. So I think this is the way we should go on a diplomatic footing, as well as, where Sri Lanka should follow the rules-based order and the free and open Indo-Pacific. These are the values that we have cherished from our foreign policy. And Sri Lanka has contributed immensely for the law of the sea. So there are areas that that Sri Lanka can contribute, and along with India as well as Maldives and other partners, other littorals. So Sri Lanka should be with the Quad as well as Indo-Pacific. How I saw it, when I was writing back then, was more like a sort of a paper tiger. I didn't see much muscle or things happening, but I'm really happy that once when I see the EU strategy slowly rolling out, as well as few other areas where the Quad 2.0. I think there should be a country-specific activity on the Indo-Pacific. That's really important, because what you see is that countries like Sri Lanka, there are a lot of inroads, Chinese inroads, which are built. For example, the port city. Now, there is no way of revisiting. So one of the questions that was raised by one senior academic from the US was, can you revisit in few years' time? No, I don't see you can revisit once the bill is passed and all that. It's the same question for Hambantota. So it's important that you have these values as well as you have the Indo-Pacific in countries like Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka should be part of it.
Right. Great. Thanks for writing this book. It enhances understanding of Sri Lanka and its dilemma in a way, and the importance it has in the Indian Ocean as well as in the Indo-Pacific. Thank you very much, and good luck to you for better sales and better spread of this book in coming months. I know COVID must have prevented this, but certainly good luck to you for more such books and more such writing. Thank you for joining us on Books Corner.
Thank you, Nitin. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.